screen. So good afternoon, everybody. Big warm welcome to all of you. I always say that, but I mean it because it's lovely to have your company. And we have a lovely interviewee for this afternoon, a really nice, a nice time to have with Dr. Beverly Searle. Just to give a little bit of a background to this, when I first came across Beverly and met her for the first time, we had I think you know this story. My daughter had given birth to a baby called India, and for 3 months we kind of worked on the assumption that she was basically a baby that had several health issues, but she was going to be okay once her health issues got fixed. However, my daughter Susie had, for the 3 months since India's birth, had been saying to me rather desperately, "Mum, there's definitely something more wrong with India than the fact that she's got heart problems and she can't breathe. I think there's something really seriously wrong with her." So I naturally did all the mothering thing of trying to put her mind at rest. Anyway, on a Friday afternoon, I just want you to imagine what this felt like. We received, Susie phoned me at about 6 o'clock in the evening and was in very distraught. And she said, "We've just had the blood test results back on India, the genetic tests, and it shows that she's got a duplication and a deletion on her 18th chromosome. They've said don't look at Google during the weekend, and they'll see us on Monday to tell us what it means. But I think it's very bad news." So you can imagine just what that felt like. So I couldn't wait to get home and get onto my laptop and go onto Google. And the first thing that I found on the Saturday morning was unique rare chromosomal disorders, because we've been told that this was a chromosomal disorder. And I contacted Beverly, not knowing anything about her, not knowing anything about unique. And it was like a hand coming out of the darkness. I can't tell you, I can't put it more strongly than that, really. It was just brilliant. Beverly, I emailed her and Beverly came back to me very quickly. I mean, that morning, Saturday morning. And she could not have been more kind or more supportive and more helpful, really. And it was also quite reassuring. So I owe a great debt of gratitude to Beverly, and have since then always been incredibly supportive of Unique, which is a very, very special charity. And I'm so delighted to have her come this afternoon, because I really want all of you to know more about what she does, and what this all means, because it's very, very important, as I said, to families like ours, and there are lots and lots of families like ours. So Beverly, let me come to you and welcome you. Delighted to have your company, as I said, and just start off by telling us your story. So tell us how you came to be involved with Unique. I think something like 22 years ago.
Well, it's actually over 30 years, Tricia. I've been working for the organisation for 22 years. You know, life throws curveballs, doesn't it? And I was working as a research geneticist, not a human geneticist, microbial geneticist, for many years. I had a lovely husband, really nice lifestyle, a very, very bright 3-year-old boy. And I had my second child, and she was born with a genetic disorder, a rare chromosome disorder. And here was I with a PhD in genetics. Isn't it bizarre how life throws these things at you? And like Tricia and Susie with India, there was no information about Jenny's chromosome disorder. But I didn't have to wait till Jenny was 3 months old. Jenny was born basically with a great big hole in her face, which sounds horrible, a way to describe it. But she was born with no nasal septum, so no bony bit in her nose, no upper front jaw or lip, huge great cleft in her palate all the way back, and a bifid uvula. And it was obvious that there's something drastically wrong. She was born 7 weeks early. And I remember, like Tricia, getting onto Google straight away to try and find some information. I was still on the labour table being stitched up and had a phone clamped to my ear, asking one of my friends from school, who was a doctor, I need information about facial clefts. it was actually a week later when we got the diagnosis of a rare chromosome disorder. And in fact, Jenny had a great big chunk of chromosome 18 missing. So a bigger chunk of chromosome 18 missing than India, but she didn't have the bit duplicated on the other end of chromosome 18. So some similarities and some differences. And, you know, I found absolutely no information to help us. This is what, 31 years ago now, 1990. And my doctors had no idea where to go to for information apart from some horrible papers in the peer-reviewed medical literature that were really ghastly. And I thought there and then, this is just not right. We can't have this. So once we had been told that Jenny was going to be profoundly disabled and so on and so forth, and as it happened for us, that's how it turned out to be, I thought, I've really got to find somebody who can help us. There must be some support. And the only chromosome disorder that was particularly well known at that time, and I'm sure you all know about it, was Down syndrome, so an extra chromosome 21. And I rang the Down Syndrome Association in the UK up and said, do you know of anybody who can help with chromosome 18 problems? And they tell me about this lady in Harrow in London. And it was this wonderful lady. This is my epiphany, just like Tricia finding me. I found Edna Knight. And she was a mum of 4 daughters, 2 of whom had been born with disability. But she had to wait until the girls were well in their teens before she got a diagnosis, because the technology wasn't there to diagnose these issues. And it was just wonderful being able to speak to somebody on the phone, just like Tricia spoke to me, pass it on, with Edna, because she understood her daughters are much more able than Jenny was, but nevertheless, just having that connection was fantastic. And I decided that maybe, you know, with my postdoctoral background in genetics, I might be able to help Edna, so that when she had the first conference for Unique, she'd managed to get a few other families together. We set up a committee, as you do, and it was from there that we grew Unique. Now, by huge coincidence, because there was so little information about these very rare chromosome disorders, we decided that we really had to start collecting information about the lifetime effects. And as I say, by huge coincidence, my husband was a database specialist, and he was able to create this database for us that we still use today. And from the 5 families that Edna started with way back in 1984, and there were about 400 by the time I joined Unique, we've grown the organization until now we have, I think it's nearly 25,000 families in over 110 countries worldwide, representing 27,000 young people, girls, boys, men, women with rare chromosome disorders, just like Jenny, just like India, but different because they've got different bits of different chromosomes involved, so their symptoms are different. And just to welcome Jane here, we have lots of members in North Carolina, and the USA is actually our 2nd biggest group of families. So I think we've got over 9,000 families from the States involved in Unique. Most of the families will come from the UK, about 40%, but we're helping families all over the world, including families who don't speak English. So we're now translating lots of information guides that we've developed into other languages, and it's all done for free by clinicians, geneticists worldwide who really believe in what we do. Clinic. And it's just magnificent how the organization's grown since I joined, and certainly since Tricia joined. In fact, son-in-law is one of our trustees, so it's a really fun event.
Yeah, India's dad, Ben, is involved with Unique, as you say, as one of the trustees. That's a fantastic resume of what, you know, what's gone on in the last 22 years or so. I mean, a huge journey you've all been on. Let's just go wind back a little bit. So when Jenny was born, what was the impact on your life immediately, and Trevor's life, and also is your son called Jonathan?
Yeah, Jonathan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it was huge because there was absolutely no way I could go back to my research work. Jenny was looking after Jenny was all consuming. So she turned out, as I said, to be profoundly disabled. She could do absolutely nothing apart from smile. And even that she lost at one point because of severe epilepsy that she developed. So she was always in a wheelchair. We spent, like Susie, India's mum, we spent lots and lots of time in hospital with her in Great Ormond Street mostly. So you can imagine the disruption, to my career, which really, in the form it was, disappeared. I thought that was the end of any decent life for me, frankly. For Trevor, it was huge pressure because somebody had to go out to pay the bills, to earn money to pay the bills, to keep the mortgage paid and keep a roof over our heads. And of course, we needed a bigger home. For Jonathan, he'd had 3 years of devoted care from mummy and daddy. And then Jenny arrived and we had to pay so much more attention just to keep her alive. That of course we couldn't spend as much time with Jonathan as we would have liked. But we did spend good quality time with him, even though the quantity might not have been huge. So, we managed to get people in to help with Jenny at certain points of the week. But it had a huge influence, and it does on lots of siblings. It's a really big issue. As it's turned out, we've all helped with the charity. It's become a family affair. And in fact, Jonathan is now, it's gone full circle. He's now a paediatrician with an interest in cardiology at Great Ormond Street, where Jenny spent so many months and years of treatment and care.
Isn't that fantastic? I think it's not unusual when there are siblings who have special needs, children in the family. They go on to want to do something to support and help that situation in whatever way they can. We were chatting about this morning, and Jonathan becoming a paediatrician, but there are people who become, as you say, social workers. It's whatever they can, in fact, just to support that situation, because they have such close first-hand experience of it, just as Jonathan had. It'd be interesting to see what Freya does with the rest of her life, because she's now 11, and she's fantastic with India. She's such a kind and sweet and supportive sibling to India, and it's lovely to see actually the impact that it's had on Freya. The positive impact that it's had on Freya. There's obviously been negative impacts, but there have been positive impacts. Let's also talk a little bit, just for clarity's sake, about what is a rare chromosomal disorder. We use these words, so just explain that a little bit more to us, because I think we need to understand it better.
Okay, so apologies to those of you who've had a career in biology or genetics, and I don't know what your backgrounds are, but just in case you're not familiar, we've each usually got 23 pairs of chromosomes. So you've got 2 of chromosome 1, 2 of chromosome 2, all the way up to chromosome 22, got 2 of those. And then you also have 2 X's if you're a girl, or an X and a Y if you're a boy. And most of these chromosomes carry genes, so the instructions that make our bodies work properly, or function properly, or develop properly. And nature doesn't put all its eggs in one basket. So you don't get all your heart genes on chromosome 1 and all your brain genes on chromosome 2. They get mixed up across all your chromosomes. And that's quite clever, really, not to have everything in the one place. But sometimes you can get bits of chromosome missing. So that means, or bits extra, or bits swapped around and rearranged. And that means that you might be missing the instructions in, for instance, with Jenny, she had most of the short arm of chromosome 18 missing. So that's lots of genes. And there are genes there that control how your forebrain forms, how your foreface forms, how your speech develops, how your motor milestones develop, so your fine motor control, your gross motor control, just about everything. And so, you know, you get very different symptoms depending on which bit of which chromosome and therefore which genes and what combination of genes are missing or extra or rearranged in some way. That's putting it very simply. Some of these chromosome disorders are incredibly rare and probably truly unique, so you wouldn't find anybody else in the world. I noticed in the chat somebody mentioned a 22q11.2 deletion, DiGeorge syndrome. Yeah, so that's one of the most common deletions, where you've got a bit missing off the inner part of the long arm, the bottom of chromosome 22, and that can cause problems with your heart and your development and your immune system. You know, so possibly quite different, say, from India and Jenny. But that it'll give you an idea of what this means. And by RAW, we mean disorders that the official definition is, in America, I think it's fewer than 1 in 2,000 cases in the general population. In Europe, it's classified as 5 in 10,000, which to my mind and my maths is exactly the same thing expressed differently, but hey ho. So there we go.
Yeah. I think it always amazes me how fine-tuned the whole process of conception and development is, to the point where these tiny, I think of them as misprints almost on certain chromosomes, have such a catastrophic effect. When, after we had the diagnosis with India, I spent one night, I just had to find out as much as I could about what she had. I just didn't know how to deal with it anyway differently. I just had to know as much as I could. And I typed her, is it the karyotype?
Karyotype, yeah.
Karyotype.
Code that describes
yeah, her code. So we were given a code for what India's chromosomal pattern was. And I typed it into Google. And up popped, this was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I just couldn't sleep. I was quite distressed during this period. And up popped a paper that had been written in 1990 by some geneticists. And it had taken 10 people with chromosome duplications. And it was really difficult for me to understand, but I just kept reading it, kept looking up the terminology. And it said, in a chromosome has a pinch point. I think it's called a centromere. So you've got a long arm and a short arm and a pinch point in the middle. And it said that if the duplication was near to the centromere, the pinch point, the disability was very much greater. But if it was at the end of that long arm, the Q arm, if it was at the end of that arm, it was likely to be less severe.
For 18q, that's true.
18q. So I read this and I kept reading it and I kept thinking, I got quite excited because I kept thinking, oh my goodness, I've got a feeling this is quite good news, because I knew that her duplication was right at the end of that arm. And that was what was due. And the little deletion that she had at the top was probably not very rich in DNA. So I can remember it's 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, sitting there and just quietly thinking, oh my goodness, please, please let it be true that this is possibly not as devastating. Because remember, when you've got a 3 or 4 month old baby, you don't know whether they're going to talk. You don't know whether they're going to walk because they're not talking or walking. And she slept all the time, but she was exhausted because she didn't sleep. She didn't breathe properly, so she couldn't sleep properly. So she appeared to be asleep all the time, but she constantly woke herself up to breathe. So my point about that is that this thing about knowledge, any knowledge that you have, just helps so much to make you feel better. And because these things are unusual and say they're quite rare, anything that you could put out there. So now my next question, after that quite long diatribe about India, but it was reassuring. And actually it has played out in that way, because if you look at India, her prognosis, when we talked to the geneticist on the Monday after the devastating news on the Friday, her prognosis was mild to severe learning and physical disability. There is a very good chance she will be in a wheelchair and will be non-verbal. So she painted quite a gloomy picture. It was quite devastating news. But if you look at India now, it hasn't played out like that. Yes, she has severe, she does have severe, to a certain extent, severe disability. However, physically she's quite well, and she manages incredibly well. So you just don't know. So that brings me to, what is it that you do at Unique? And how has that developed over the years that you've been CEO? So you've been involved for 22 years. So what's developed over the last 22 years?
Well, it's before that, because I started as a committee member back in 1990. So in 96, we formed the database that I was telling you about and got a website. And the reason we wanted to do that was because, as we've both said, there was so little information about the outcomes of these different disorders, not just at the time the children are diagnosed, not that snapshot, that window, because that's not actually much use to you. You want to know what's happening when they're 20 or 30 or 40, or will they even get to that age? Most parents will say, are they going to die? It's the first thing you think of. And I was determined, as were other people on the committee, that we should start collecting the lifetime natural histories of each child, as many children as we could, with these different disorders. And that's why we developed the database. And from that, we've been able to get enough children by going worldwide, and enough adults to get information on certain types of chromosome disorder, that meant we could develop information guides or information leaflets. And they're not really hard to understand. They're written for lay people who've not got a background in genetics. It's very straightforward, but they tell you what might happen, and that's the word, might, because every child is unique, even with the same genetic diagnosis. It just gives you a guide of the things to look out for. And it's not just a guide for the parents, because of course the doctors are still flummoxed about what a lot of these things mean. So the information guides that we're developing are being used all the time in clinic by doctors to help them with their families, their patients. And we've now developed, I think it's guides to over 250 different rare chromosome disorders. And that there are actually over 300 guides, because some go on to how different disorders affect people in adulthood, or different aspects of a condition. And then we've got lots and lots of other information as we've understood what families need to know about, about genetics, about genetic technology, because that's changed vastly, certainly since Jenny was born, when you could only look down a microscope to view what was happening to chromosomes. So you were missing most diagnoses because you just couldn't see tiny changes. So when India was diagnosed, and I think she had something called microarray technology. And now, of course, you've all heard about people having been PCR tested for COVID, haven't you? Well, they are using a special genetic sequencing technique, what we call DNA sequencing, to look at COVID. It's a very similar technique for looking for changes of the tiniest size in children with these symptoms, or developmental delay or ill health, like India and Jenny had at birth. And now they can actually get down to single letter changes in the DNA that goes to make up the genes that are in the chromosomes. So from seeing huge losses, you're now down to, tiny changes that you couldn't possibly have seen, even probably 15 years ago, 10 years ago. It's quite remarkable. And we're just so lucky in the UK to have such a fantastic genomic medicine service now, where children and families will get a diagnosis more quickly. But we're trying to work with that system and, put information into understandable nuggets for families to use, so they're not terrified. Well, they will be terrified when they first get a diagnosis, but at least there's some support, there's some information, and there's some networking through Unique.
Yeah, I mean, all of that's so important. Tell us a little bit about what happened with Jenny. So she wasn't really expected to live for very long, was she, when she was born?
Well, what you get at birth isn't necessarily what happens later on with some children. Some children do very, very well. Sadly for Jenny, the prognosis turned out to be true, and probably worse, actually. So by the time she was 4 months, she started to have some very severe seizures. They're a type of seizure called infantile spasms. And basically, they're very subtle. So they look, they're called salam attacks in old parlance. They look a little bit like people going salam, their head drop and so forth. But they're utterly devastating because they wipe out any development, it just goes. And Jenny had been able to smile, and all that was wiped out. It was awful. You can just imagine, can't you, trying to look after this little child that had at least smiled at you and now was doing absolutely nothing. She did eventually get her smile back, but she remained for all her life profoundly physically disabled. She couldn't even turn over in bed. She couldn't use her hands to play with toys. She never spoke. She couldn't use her hands to do sign language. It was a lot of couldn'ts. And she was very, very medically complex. Really complex, had all sorts of problems, even to getting osteoporosis and breaking her leg when she was being moved and handled in a sling, because she was always in a special wheelchair. So she was incredibly challenged. But don't let people tell you that children like that have no personality. She could speak volumes by giving you a very hard stare at times. She had the most amazing personality. She would stare people out till they paid attention to her. Then she'd give them the biggest smile, because she got a smile back eventually. She sort of babbled. She never really spoke words. But she was very determined. And if she didn't want to do something, she would scream and scream and scream till you took her out of the situation. Wheeled her out of the hall at school where it was noisy. And then she'd turn around and smile at you, like, I got my own way. Isn't that incredibly powerful? So she took an awful lot of looking after, but we had some great help with that, thanks to the NHS, thank God for the NHS, and various other respite places and so forth. And she's left such a legacy, quite remarkable.
Yeah, she died when she was 21.
She did. And thank goodness, it was the most, not pleasant, but it was the best demise possible, because she always had very severe lung problems, breathing problems, and she used to plug. And she was actually at her, probably the healthiest for her she'd been. And she just plugged in her sleep and stayed asleep. Mm-hmm. And if you could wish for a better death for your child, I can't think of one, frankly.
Yeah. So
it wasn't traumatic for her. It just happened. She just slipped away, and she got to 21. So we got 20 and a half years bonus with Jenny.
Yeah.
Prognosis.
Yeah.
You might think, oh my goodness, that sounds terrible. When you have a child like Jenny who's so severe, your perspective on life completely changes. Your goalposts change. Things that you would think would be awful, you welcome. Jenny actually developed colon cancer, completely separate from her 18p deletion, and ended up having to have a colon removed. Now you might think, oh my God, 18 years old and having a colon removed. But she'd been in nappies and doubly incontinent up to this point. So to me, it was fantastic, because now we had this bag on her tummy that we could just open, and we were off in our van, and it gave us freedom. So do you see? I mean, it's an extreme case with Jenny, but you've got to make the most of your situation. And if you can accept your child as they are and get as much support as possible, you can still have a really good quality of life.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a remarkable story, Beverly, and it's a great testament to you as a person and your family, because Trevor and Jonathan were also going through this with you. But it is absolutely incredible how you adapt to that situation, but also how these children, in their own way, they just bring. I used to say to Susie so often in the hospital, yes, she's bringing problems, but she's also bringing solutions. She will bring solutions with her. We will meet this and it will be okay, because that's the way it is. You learn to live with it, and you get on with it. And so we had nothing like the sort of situation that you were confronting with Jenny. And it's wonderful that you had that 21 years with her. It really is.
I was very lucky. We were very lucky. Yeah.
Yes, and she was very lucky to have you too. You're just about to retire.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely incredible. So tell us a little bit about that. So you've decided to pass Unique CEO role on to another person, and I think you're retiring in August, which is absolutely amazing. So tell us a little bit about what you're hoping for from your retirement.
Well, I decided that I'm 66 in August, and I decided that I've spent 31 years with Unique, as pleasurable as it's been in many ways, but also quite stressful, as you could imagine. And my whole life has been just devoted to rare chromosome disorders, rare genetic disorders. And I think it's the pandemic, it's just made me think, you really got to get on with it, and you're not going to be around forever. And I'm lucky enough still to have a lovely husband around, and who's a bit older than me, and we want to do things. So I've decided now that we're in a really good position. We've got an excellent team at Unique, really, really devoted, dedicated, highly talented younger people. And now's the time to hand on the baton. And I know we're going to be in really safe hands. And it just felt right to do it at this point. We're coming to the end of our 5-year strategy. And I thought it needs young blood to start thinking about the new era of genetics and genomics. And to think people do things differently as well these days, in these days of social media and so forth. They want information in different ways, and it's good to get new blood sometimes into organizations. So that doesn't mean to say I'm going to disappear off the edge of the planet. I'm certainly going to volunteer for Unique if they want me to give talks or stuff envelopes or do those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But I also want to expand my creativity. I've been a scientist all my life, and I fancy doing things like buying a greenhouse and growing my own plants and tomatoes and volunteering for the National Trust and doing all sorts of things. And also, I am a churchgoer, and there are lots of difficult situations that we know about in my church. Asylum seekers who live locally that we're helping. I would really like to get involved in that. My village has a great history association. But also, pre-pandemic, we just loved traveling. I hope we'll get back to have the opportunity to go traveling again. We can certainly go and see lots of the UK. So I'll have lots and lots of things to do.
Yeah, you're obviously going to be extremely busy.
I think so. Yeah. And I might even get your lovely ladies to do my makeup sometime. I was just about to go to Wimbledon to get it done, and then lockdown came in, so I never got it done. So
we've got lots of videos to watch.
I watch your videos avidly because I think, oh, that's how they do it.
So Emily, let's come to you. Have you got any questions there for Beverly?
So the first one's from Joan. She asks, is there any government funding available, or is Unique purely funded by donation?
Yeah, never had a penny piece from the government. And that's because there's never really been any government funding, but also it helps us keep independent so we can do what we know is needed in our community, and we're very close to our community. So we're funded by donations, fundraising. We apply to trusts and foundations. But a lot of what we do is done pro bono by geneticists and other clinicians all around the world, and university students, and because they really like what we do, and they come and help us do all sorts of things, which is fantastic. But it's mostly fundraising and donations, and doing walks like Sue and Tony.
Yeah,
people jumping out of aeroplanes and goodness knows what.
That's great, thank you. And Alison asks, can you tell us about neurofibromatosis as a genetic condition?
Now that we don't cover, and there's a very good group that does cover neurofibromatosis. So we don't cover every single genetic disorder because we just couldn't. I mean, it's just an infinite variety. But there is a group for neurofibromatosis. Most of the cases we cover are where children are born with developmental delay, intellectual impairment, among other symptoms. That's the sort of group of people that we're looking after.
Thank you. And another question was, how do you compete with very large charities with huge fundraising budgets? I'm assuming that's in terms of people donating.
Because people use our services and realise how valuable we are to them, and just go all out for raising funds for us. We've got a really powerful story to tell. Well, you've heard about India, you've heard about Jenny, and if we can get in front of fundraising trusts, we nearly always will get a grant, which is remarkable. You know, I can give you an idea of how powerful our story is. Do you remember the Daily Mail used to run, I think they used to give £100,000 away to charities, children's charities. They did this for a number of years. And we applied and told our story. We ended up winning that £100,000 because of all the stories that our families had made. And we were up against the big boys like Childline, NSPCC, so on and so forth. But our families voted in such huge numbers that we beat the rest. So that really shows how powerful, you know, we are, but small. And actually, if you costed out what we do, it would come to many, many, many times the amount of income we have, because such a lot of it, as I say, is done pro bono. So you get a lot of bang for your buck, as they say, when you come to Unique.
Thank you. And then the last question was, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to the parents or grandparents of a child or baby who has been diagnosed with a chromosomal abnormality?
Please contact us, because even if we can't help because of the particular condition that the child or grandchild has, we're pretty sure we'll know somebody who can. And it just makes such a difference being among people who really understand what you're going through. And don't forget, most of my team on the front line have a child or a relative with a rare chromosome disorder. They've got personal experience as well as professional experience, and there's a real synergy there. So you know, it's very, very powerful when families come to us and we can help them. But we're really embedded in the rare disorder world, and we do an awful lot to signpost people to the right place. The other strand of our work before we go, we also have worked, like I was on the Rare Disease Policy Board at the Department of Health and Social Care. And we're on all sorts of advisory boards and committees for research projects, and that is the sort of work we do in the background as well. We're using our professional expertise, because 4 of us now are postdocs with genetics experience, but 3 first-degree biologists, and now we will soon have 3 genetic counsellors on our team as part of the team. And we're only a team of 10, so 6 whole-time equivalents. So we're a highly qualified team of mostly women. Just one chap, Craig, our COO, who does a brilliant job keeping the show on the road. But you know, we're a very committed team, and anybody would have a massive welcome if they came to us.
Thank you so much for answering those.
Thanks, Emily. I think I'm right in saying, Bev, that you're actually quite a tight, small team, aren't you? In terms of, you know, you run this charity, but you've got 3 full-time staff. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's me, Arti Patel, who's one of our information officers, and Craig, our COO, and the 3 of us are full-time, and then the rest of the team, 7 others, are part-time. So as I say, it's about 6 or 7 whole-time equivalents in our team of 10. So if you have a look on our website and see the amount of work we do, I think you'll be astounded at what we do with such a small budget and such a small team. But we also have a great team of trustees behind us. We bring professional expertise like Ben, Tricia's son-in-law. You know, so we're very fortunate. Yeah,
but I think it's as I say, it's fantastic that you do what you do with such a really small, tight-knit team, and as you say, all of them have got some kind of personal experience of dealing with a child who's been damaged in this way by a chromosomal disorder. So Beverly, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to talk to you, really lovely. And you mentioned Sue Cusden, so just to let everybody know what's happening at the moment, I'm sure most of you know this, she's a super trooper, Sue Cusden. She wanted to walk the Hadrian's Wall challenge with her husband, Tony, and something she's wanted to do for a long time, got disrupted by COVID, and she came to me and said, Tricia, we'd like to do this and we'd like to raise some money for a charity. What do you think? So would you like to nominate a charity? So my first thought was to nominate Unique. I always think of Unique first because they're a small charity, they're an incredibly deserving charity, and also they have been enormously helpful and supportive to us as a family. And I just feel they deserve every penny that they get in whatever way possible. So I suggested Unique. They're walking this week. They finish on the 8th, so a couple of days' time. They've been doing really, really well. Sue's been posting updates practically every day.
With a hand up, actually.
Oh,
to speak.
I'm a bit of a mess, I'm sorry, but we've been out in the rain.
You've been walking all day.
Yes, yeah, we have. We're just having a nice cup of tea. We're just in our B&B now, having a nice cup of tea. But I've been able to listen to what's been going on, and Tony's in the room as well, so he's been able to listen as well. So I've caught the last bit, but I shall obviously listen to the first bit of your chat, and when we finish the walk probably. But no, it's going really, really well, and we're just overwhelmed with everybody's good thoughts, and I mean the wonderful encouragement that everyone's been giving us, and obviously all the fabulous donations as well for Unique.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. Can't thank you enough, Sue.
No,
no, please. No, Craig, our COO, keeps updating me. You know, he's like, they're doing this now, and they got to there, and it's brilliant. So pleased.
No, we are honoured to be doing it for you, and obviously with Tricia's granddaughter as well, receiving help from you. As I say, we are absolutely honoured, and we're humbled by everybody's, you know, kind wishes and encouragement. And you know, we hope that whatever we can raise for Unique, that it will obviously go to you know, whatever you want to put it towards, to help, you know, with your support for other families.
Thank you, much appreciated. It really is.
Lovely. So it's brilliant to have you on the call, actually, because it makes it even more real. So we're just over £2,000 on that, which is phenomenal. Absolutely.
Yeah, amazing.
And I also hope, Sue, that it has inspired your walking to a certain extent, that you're walking with such incredible purpose, because you know that you've got everybody behind you, and you know, loving what you're doing. So thank you, and well done. Keep going.
We will do. Thank you. Be another update later.
Another update later, and all power to you and Tony. Thank Tony as well, because we really appreciate it. So bye-bye, Sue. And finally, to say goodbye to Beverly, thank you again very, very much. Thanks everybody for coming along and listening. And you know, we've really, really enjoyed this afternoon hearing your story, Beverly, but also hearing how important Unique is and the important work that you do. So I thank you for that too. And
thank you, everybody.
Happy retirement. My goodness.
I shall have a really nice time, I'm sure. But thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. I really appreciate it, and spread the word about Unique, because people need to hear about this. We don't need to remain isolated.
We will. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.